By the end of this video, you may understand why your self might not exist and why that could be the best news of your life. You never existed. You're not who you think you are. At first glance, this statement may seem uncomfortable, absurd, even offensive, but if observed calmly, it holds a key to a door that few dare to open, the door of self-knowledge. We live much of our lives basing our decisions, desires, and anxieties around an idea we call the self. We give this self a name, a story, a set of preferences, traumas, titles, and opinions. And over time we become so attached to this construction that we begin to defend it tooth and nail. Any criticism becomes a threat, any loss a personal tragedy, any change a danger to the identity that seems so solid, but is actually made of sand. This illusion of permanence, the belief that there is an unchanging self within us, independent of time and circumstances, is, according to the Buddha, the main source of human suffering. And the most curious part, almost no one realizes they're living inside this prison. It's like a subtle mist covering the eyes of the mind, a mist made of habits, conditioning, and repetition. We build this self from what others say, from what we learn out of fear, from desires we don't fully understand. And little by little, we become prisoners of an image we didn't even consciously choose. How many times have you said, "This is just how I am. That's my personality. I can't change." But who is this I making those claims? Is it the same as yesterday? The same as 10 years ago? Will it be the same tomorrow? Buddhist philosophy, with its ancient depth, doesn't invite us to believe in something new. It proposes an experience, the direct experience of looking inward and sincerely observing what we call I. And what is often discovered is unsettling, because behind the name, the profession, the likes, the fears, and the memories, there is no solid self. There is only impermanence, movement, a constant flow of thoughts, emotions, sensations, and perceptions. But rather than creating despair, this realization can bring deep liberation. Because if the self is impermanent, then suffering is too. Pain passes, identities transform, losses don't define, achievements don't complete us. In the silence of this observation, a new space arises, a space of peace, of freedom, of authenticity, not because you've discovered who you are, but because you finally stopped sustaining who you never were. If you're someone who appreciates philosophy, Buddhism, and self-inquiry with a critical perspective, this channel was made for you. I invite you to like this video and subscribe. You're in the right place. Suffering is not an exception. It is a silent constant in the human experience. Even in moments of apparent tranquility, it hides, sometimes in boredom, sometimes in anxiety, sometimes in the fear that something good will end. No matter how comfortable someone's life may be, on some level they are dealing with pain, physical, emotional, spiritual, with past losses or the fear of future ones, with the feeling that something is missing, even when everything seems in place. We live in an age of extraordinary advances: technology, science, medicine, communication. We have more comfort and convenience than any generation before us, but paradoxically, we are one of the most anxious, lonely, and emotionally exhausted societies in history. People are tired, not just physically, but internally. Tired of maintaining an image, meeting expectations, fitting unattainable standards. Tired of running without knowing exactly where to. There is a growing sense of emptiness even amid abundance, and this emptiness is not filled with more achievements, it deepens. Buddha lived over 2,500 years ago, and yet his view of human nature is eerily relevant. He didn't speak of suffering as an abstract philosopher, he lived it in his own skin. He left a palace, a family, and all material comfort, not out of disdain, but because he realized something that many take a lifetime to see. No worldly pleasure can silence inner suffering. When he witnessed old age, illness, and death for the first time, he saw clearly what we all try to avoid, that life, no matter how beautiful, is also fragile, that time takes everything, that the body deteriorates, that attachment inevitably turns into pain. But instead of sinking into pessimism, Buddha did the opposite. He dedicated his life to searching for an answer. Is there a path? Is it possible to live without this constant anguish? Is there a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances? This search is not exclusive to monks or spiritual masters. It exists in anyone who has ever asked, even for a second, is this it? Is life just working, paying bills, accumulating stuff, trying to be accepted, and then dying? Buddhist philosophy doesn't demand blind faith. It offers an invitation. Observe honestly. Observe your mind. Observe your desires. Observe the repetitive cycle of wanting, achieving, being frustrated, wanting again. And ask, is this freedom? Buddha saw that the root of suffering is not in the world itself, but in how we perceive it. And this distorted perception is largely born from a mistaken idea of who we are. When we believe we are just this body, this mind, this story, any threat to it becomes unbearable. That's why understanding suffering is the first step on the spiritual journey. Not to resign ourselves to it, but to go beyond, to transform it into clarity, into compassion, into lucidity. Buddha was not a miracle. He was not a divine entity. He was a human being like you and me, restless, observant, deeply sensitive to the suffering of the world, but unlike most, he chose not to look away. While everyone else sought distractions, he sat down, in silence, facing himself, and it was in that silence that he saw what no one wanted to see, the origin of pain. His first realization was not a solution, but a diagnosis. The first noble truth is simple and direct. Life contains suffering, not as a curse, not as punishment, but as an unavoidable reality of human existence. This truth may sound pessimistic at first, but in fact, it is deeply liberating, because everything begins when we stop pretending everything is fine, when we courageously acknowledge that there is something that cannot be resolved through distraction or external promises. There is a real restlessness, a kind of existential thirst that no achievement fully satisfies. The second noble truth points to the origin of this suffering: attachment. Attachment to the idea of control, attachment to pleasure, attachment to identity, attachment to the belief that things should be different. It is this attachment that breeds frustration, anxiety, fear, because the world, by its very nature, is impermanent. Nothing lasts, nothing is guaranteed, and everything we try to hold on to slips away. But Buddha didn't stop at the diagnosis. He brought hope, not illusory hope, but hope based on direct experience. The third noble truth states that suffering can cease. Yes, it is possible to live differently, without the prison of identity, without the constant urge to fill a void, without depending on the external to be at peace. And that peace doesn't come from the outside. It arises when we stop wishing for things to be different than they are, when we learn to be present even in the face of impermanence. Finally, the fourth noble truth reveals the path to this liberation, the noble eightfold path. 8 practices that transform the way we see the world and ourselves. This path is not religious. It doesn't require conversion. It only requires presence, ethics, observation, and compassion. It is a silent calling, an invitation to lucidity, and above all, a reminder. Transformation doesn't begin when you become someone new. It begins when you allow yourself to pause and sincerely observe who you've been trying to be. Obstacle, the depth of the path. Recognizing suffering is only the beginning. Understanding its origin is a step further. But the true work, the hardest and most transformative, begins when we decide to walk the path of liberation. The Noble Eightfold Path is that path, not a linear one, nor a set of rigid rules, but a living practice that unfolds in every moment of existence. 8 interconnected aspects that, when cultivated, purify the mind, open the heart, and gradually dissolve the illusion of the self. Let's explore them one by one. 1. Right view. This is the foundation of everything. It's seeing the world as it is, impermanent, interdependent, empty of fixed identity. Without this clear view, any spiritual practice becomes just another attempt to reinforce the ego. Right view is letting go of the filters of desire and fear and looking at reality with clean eyes. 2. Right intention. Here, we train the mind's intention. When unobserved, the mind produces thoughts driven by greed, anger, and delusion. Right intention is guided by renunciation, compassion, and nonviolence. It's not positive thinking, but lucid thinking. 3. Right speech. Words carry weight. They can build or destroy. Right speech avoids lying, slander, harshness, and idle chatter. Speak less, listen more. And when you do speak, let it be with truth and kindness. 4. Right action. Living ethically. Avoid causing harm to other beings, whether through violence, theft, or reckless behavior. Act with integrity, even when no one is watching. Right action is ethics in motion. 5. Right livelihood. How we earn a living matters. Seeking sustenance in a way that doesn't cause suffering to others is an essential part of the path. This includes reflecting on the impact our work has on the world and whether it contributes to easing or increasing pain. 6. Right effort. Effort is not obsession, it's serene discipline. It's keeping the mind inclined toward goodness, nurturing healthy qualities, and abandoning destructive habits. It requires consistency, but also self-compassion. 7. Right mindfulness, being present, fully aware of the body, sensations, thoughts, and emotions, observing without judgment, without repression, without identification. Right mindfulness is the soil where all other practices blossom. 8. Right concentration, the cultivation of a stable, serene, focused mind, a state of stillness that allows for deep insight. Right concentration is not an escape, it is a deep dive. These 8 aspects are not goals to be accomplished. They are directions to be followed, internal pathways that, little by little, free us from the rigidity of the ego and reconnect us with reality as it is. But it must be said, this path is not easy. It requires renunciation of haste, renunciation of the need to be right, renunciation of the constant search for validation, and perhaps this is the most challenging part, letting go of what causes us suffering, even if we've clung to it for years. This is where many give up, because the ego doesn't want to be dissolved. It wants to be fed, validated, praised. Following Buddha's path is therefore an act of courage, silent, steady, intimate. You don't need to give up everything to follow the Buddha's path. You don't need to renounce your life, your routine, or your relationships, but perhaps it is necessary to renounce the illusion. the need for control, the idea that you need to become someone instead of simply being fully present. The spiritual journey, in this sense, is not a climb upward, it is a dive inward. And like any dive, it requires silence and breath. You don't need to understand everything right now. You don't need to change your life overnight. But you can, today, sit for a few minutes and simply observe. Observe your breath, observe your thoughts, observe the restlessness without moving, without trying to control, without seeking a result. This is the beginning of the practice, and it can be found everywhere. In the way you listen to someone without interrupting, in the care with which you choose your words when speaking, in the respect for each meal savored with attention, in the way you treat others when no one is watching, and especially in the way you treat yourself, with kindness, with patience, with presence. The practice of the path is not distant. It is in the everyday, in the awareness of each gesture, in the deliberate choice not to react automatically, not to feed what pulls you away from peace. Buddha taught that suffering can cease, and that is a tremendous promise, not in the sense of something magical or external. It is the reminder that freedom begins the moment you stop running from what you feel. So, if there is one thing you can do right now, it is this. Stop, be silent, breathe, not to achieve something but to stop escaping from yourself. Do it not as a technique, but as an act of love. Love for the awareness that lives within you, silent, awake, compassionate. Love for all those who, like you, are trying to find a place of rest within themselves. The path is here, and the doorway is always now. Most people believe that peace will come when they become the best version of themselves. But what if true peace isn't in becoming anything or anyone? What if it lies precisely in the emptying of the idea of being someone? Buddha didn't find himself as one finds a hidden treasure. He undid the illusion that there was something fixed to be found. This is the essence of the teaching of anatta, or non-self, one of the most revolutionary and, at the same time, most misunderstood ideas in Buddhism. It does not deny the experience of being, but denies that there is something permanent behind that experience. What you call I is, in fact, a flow of sensations, of thoughts, of memories, of emotions, like the flame of a candle dancing in the wind, never the same from one moment to the next, and yet still burning. There is no fixed core. There is no you watching everything from a distance. There is only what happens, and the awareness that witnesses it all without needing to control. Suffering arises from the attempt to fix what is, by nature, changing, from trying to sustain an identity when everything is constantly crumbling and being reborn. But when you stop resisting, when you let go of the need to hold what cannot be held, what emerges is light, is silent, is true. Enlightenment is not an unattainable state. It's not a prize nor a spiritual trophy. It is, often, a moment of surrender, a moment of clarity, the direct perception that there is no self separate from the world and therefore nothing to protect. In that space, compassion blossoms, naturally, effortlessly, because when you stop living only for yourself, you begin to see others as parts of yourself, and then everything changes. You no longer need to win, no longer need to prove anything, no longer need to run. You simply are, present, whole, free. Buddha's greatest discovery wasn't about the world, it was about the mind, and above all, about the emptiness that exists when we stop clinging to who we think we are. In that emptiness, there is no absence, there is space, space for the real, for the simple, for what has always been here but was never seen with unguarded eyes. So if you truly want to find yourself, start here. Let go of everything that is not you, and maybe what remains is not a self, but a silent peace that deep down you always knew was there. Enlightenment is not an unattainable state. It's not a prize nor a spiritual trophy. It is often a moment of surrender, a moment of clarity. The direct perception that there is no self separate from the world, and therefore nothing to protect. In that space, compassion blossoms, naturally, effortlessly, because when you stop living only for yourself, you begin to see others as parts of yourself, and then everything changes. You no longer need to win, no longer need to prove anything, no longer need to run. You simply are, present, whole, free. Buddha's greatest discovery wasn't about the world, it was about the mind, and above all, about the emptiness that exists when we stop clinging to who we think we are. In that emptiness, there is no absence, there is space. Space for the real, for the simple, for what has always been here, but was never seen with unguarded eyes. So, if you truly want to find yourself, start here. Let go of everything that is not you, and maybe what remains is not what self, but a silent peace that deep down you always knew was there.